You are listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Well, happy Tuesday evening, folks. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to the Intrepid radio program right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. Come on over and see all the goodness that is Odyssey Radio. Check out the schedule. See all the different things that you can listen to throughout the entire 24/7 of your life. And you can also view this show over on my YouTube channel, simulcast in video at youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. And I wish I could talk a little bit more about politics on this show. I have vowed this would not be a show about politics because I do that with Rocky Stucci over on the Situation Room 2 hours after this show airs every night. Rocky Stucci's show starts. I'm his co-host over there, have been for a year now, and we get into politics, we get into the paranormal, there's a lot of stuff that overlaps between our shows, but I've tried to keep this show absolutely free of politics. So I'm only saying that to say this is why I'm not going to make a lot of comments about the impeachment trial, about things going on in government, unless they pertain to spirituality or current events that are germane to this show. So trust me when I say that my head is full of talking about current politics and things that are going on, and I trust myself to have a fairly erudite, common-sensed approach to politics. And if you want to hear some of that, come on over to Rocky's show after this show. This show will end at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, depending on your time zone, and Rocky's show airs at midnight on Eastern Coast, 11 p.m. Central. I am on with Rocky tonight, and we're going to talk about some stuff over there. So I'm going to take politics right now, put it in this neat little box, and just push it over there. So that's why you don't hear me talking a lot about those things. Maybe we'll change that a bit in the future. For now, I want to steer away from it. The only politics I'm going to get into on this show is going to be politics of history, church history, religious history, and so on, which I kind of want to tackle a little bit tonight because I want to talk about something we've talked about already in several different ways, and that's the need to consider the possibility that our religion is mythology. Now, I've used mythology not as saying it's completely fake, but it is the body, the corpus of language and stories and events and theologies that make up what we believe, the mythology of our religion. If you are a Western Christian, you get what that is already. We've talked about a lot of the history of Western Christianity, or of Christianity at all, in the first 3 centuries being a very different thing than it is what we practice now. A lot of the belief systems are different. It went from being a mystical religion, a mystical, mythical religion, to being a literalist history religion, which turned into the Orthodox Church, which of course is the Roman Catholic Church today, and all the various branches that went into Protestantism and everything else out there. So we'll leave that idea right there, but I want you to look at a couple of things about what you believe, what you say you believe, as far as, are you Christian? Are you pagan? Are you Buddhist? Are you any of a number of denominations within or under the Catholic or Orthodox to the Protestant, to just think about all the different religions in the world. Now, the big question you have to ask yourself, and that I ask, is if all these religions exist, are they all true? Is only one of them true? And this is the stance I know we took when I was in the very conservative fundamentalist Baptist church, even into the evangelical free church where I ended up, is that there is a literal acceptance that what we believed was the corner of the truth, the only word of God, and we base that on biblical texts. As a matter of fact, there was, I don't know if this was still to this day, if this was an overall belief system or one that was put forward by one of my seminary professors. I remember it saying that the only foundation for our faith and practice is the Bible. And so what happens, and we've talked about this before, when you find that the Bible has gaps, it has holes, it has textual problems? What do you do with that? What do you do with the inconsistencies with history and within history? What do you do with the fact that early Christianity in the first 2 centuries was a completely different view of what became the literalist view later? And so I want you to consider the possibility that what you believe by way of religion might be mythology. There are at least 4,200 religions in the world today, and there's countless more that have been lost in history. And it's obvious that there's a 0 chance that all of them are the true Word of God. Some thinkers have speculated that each religion is at least a little divinely inspired and holds a piece of the puzzle that's left to us by God to put together. I think that's the last great discovery, or not last great, that is the discovery that God has given us, is to figure things out. Now, if he leaves it for us to figure out, and I'm only using he, I don't get into the he, she, goddess, God, in descriptors of God. It's easy to say he. He is I'm using it as a neutral pronoun here. But if he exists out there, and he's left it to us to figure things out, and he's left it to us to discover that there are gaps in all of these religions out there, and holes in the theologies, and messes of history with humankind, how do you find that one true thread in the great tapestry that is the truth? And I think that that's given to us to discover. And if God has done that, maybe then the intent of God, or a God, or the Creator, was for us to figure it out. And that there isn't one true way, one true belief system. So the only way to come to that conclusion is to ignore huge tracts of doctrine in each religion. And ultimately, none of them are really compatible with each other. If any religion is true, then there's only one true religion. So what's all this other stuff? So what does that really boil down to mean on a practical level? It means that there's at least over 6 billion people alive today who believe in a religion that was written 100% by human beings and 0% dictated by the Creator of the universe. So a belief system written by human beings that has no bearing on the factual nature of reality is mythology. And now I'm using mythology not in the sense of looking at the corpus, the body of a belief system, and calling it the mythology, but I'm looking at mythology as in like fables, like a storytelling, like a mythology that's been put together for a way to man to try to figure out the story of God or the gods. And so, if they're written by human beings, that might mean that there's no bearing in the factual nature of reality, no bearing on the factual nature of reality becomes mythology. All right, there. I think I've confused my own words enough, but you get where I'm going with that. The cold, hard truth of reality is that the vast majority of the people alive today believe in a mythology and dogmatically refuse to even consider the possibility that's true. So, if you believe in religion, there's automatically a 99% chance that you believe in mythology. Talking statistically, numbers-wise. If there's 4,200 different religions out there or variations on religion, somebody's believing something that isn't true, and somebody might be believing something that is true. So there's a 99% chance that you believe in mythology. If you refuse to question your belief system, there's no way for you to know if it's true. You have to question things and examine things to find out if the truth is there. Even the biblical scriptures say you have to apply discernment. Was it Jesus or was it Paul? I'm trying to think of where the passage was. He's saying, try the spirits or test the spirits to find out what is the truth. And that increases the chance that you believe in a mythology up to 99.9% if you question things and you know that there's no way for you to know for absolutely sure that they're true. That number increases to 99.99% if your religion contains any of these following things. Listen, human sacrifice, moral values that reflect the needs and wants of a specific primitive culture, instructions to hurt, kill, or look down on other people, reasons to look down on yourself, a pyramid-shaped authority structure, scientific inaccurate statements, magical beings, powers, or events that no longer exist. So these are a few things that you have to look at in trying to decipher, dissect what you believe, the religion you believe, to find out if it's true, if it's real, or if you fall into that category of believing something that's a myth. Now, some people have speculated that it doesn't matter what religion you believe in, as long as you believe in something that gives you meaning, instructions, and peace. But I bristle against that, because believing in something that isn't real is the definition of insanity. I'm Napoleon, and I believe that. That's insanity. Even if it makes me feel good about myself. It's not okay to be insane just because you like it, because it holds you and society back. So you get where I'm going with that? Believing in mythology is counterproductive, if for no other reason than it's a waste of time. It keeps you busy going through meaningless motions while ignoring real-world issues that have real consequences to you and the rest of humanity. Your life and everyone else's would be improved by you focusing on real problems. Now, let me take an aside here. There's a lot of us that have spiritual beliefs that hold us together as people. Individuals. We get peace because we believe God is in control of things. We look to God when there are problems. We pray for people. We hope that people are praying for us. All of that stuff is good stuff. The question is the object of what is supposedly in control of that you pray to, and all that, how do you know that it's real? And do any of those elements I talked about, are they part and parcel of what comes with that package? So when you put your trust in something, you put your faith in something, you operate out of the peace that it gives you, you have to ask yourself, is that peace coming from something where the whole package of what I say I believe, where that deity is contained in that package, is that mythology? Does it have problems? Does it have gaps? Are there questions about it? How do you know what you believe is the true thing to believe in? Is there only one true religion? And some people might say, hey, Scotty, back off. I may not believe the whole system of the literalist Christianity, the Orthodox Christianity, But I pull parts out of that work for me. And it works for my family. It works for my prayer life. It works for giving me peace. But the problem you have to ask is, and I'm not trying to set us all adrift here, but I'm asking, is that a problem if you believe in something for which there is no proof and for which other religions can contradict? So, have you ever considered the fact that you might be wrong about what you believe in? I have. That's what leads to this whole series of shows I've been doing. That's what has led to my study and my research over the years. Even though some of my books have been focused on researching certain mythology within the mythology of Christianity or Judeo-Christianity, you have to ask yourself if the whole body of what you believe is truth. Is there one true way? And maybe a lot of you are saying right now, how can we know how to live without religion? If religion indeed is something that is filled with holes because it's all man-made. Now, remember that most of the world doesn't believe in religion. They believe in mythology. So the real question is, how can we know to live without mythology? If mythology is just a belief system made up by humans, and you've spent your whole life living in accordance to those rules, you already know the answer. We can make up our own ethics, and in fact, that's what we've been doing all along. If you look especially in Western Christianity in general, we've made up the rules as we go. We've established hierarchy as we go to enforce those rules to us. So we've already been doing that, so we already know the answer. We just haven't been honest with ourselves about it. If taking personal responsibility for your own ethics sounds scary or haphazard, consider that mythologies can contain horrible rules that can lead you to hurt yourself or even to hurt other people, which makes it all the more imperative that you question your beliefs. As we all know, literalist Christianity in the Orthodox Church led to the Inquisition, led to the Crusades, led to all these different things that were horrific things on their surface, and religious wars. So if your religion has you hurting other people or hurting yourself, it's imperative that you question that belief system. Now, this is especially true if you absolutely insist on believing one of our religions in the world is the divine truth. Everyone wants to believe that the religion is the right one, but at least 6 billion people have to be dead wrong in their faith if your religion is the truth. So statistically, you're probably one of those. And the only way that you or anyone else can find the right religion is to scrutinize yours objectively. And now this might sound like heresy, and it might have gotten you burned at the stake 500 to 800 years ago, but it's probably not a coincidence that you were created with the capacity for reason, for skepticism, for doubt, for logic. You were created with those things. I believe divinely created to have those things. For the billions of people who believe in mythology, it's a necessity. If your religion can stand the test, the scrutiny of truth, there's no danger in putting yours underneath that microscope, underneath that scrutiny of truth. If your religion can't stand the test of truth, objectively, it's the only way you'll ever free yourself. By putting yourself under the scrutiny of truth, what you believe under the scrutiny of truth. Your quest for truth isn't just about you spiritually, individually. Most religions encourage you to convert non-believers. And even without actively proselytizing on the street corner, you passively send out the message that people should join your faith just by living in accordance with it. And I was there, even in my youth group days, in junior high school and high school. We joined church calling. It was every Tuesday night calling or canvassing. We would go out to neighborhoods. We had index files of cards of people who had visited the church or general areas where the church could do some outreach. And we'd go out and we'd knock on doors. And we'd have gospel tracts and we'd ask people, do you know where you'll be 5 minutes after you die? We as youth group, we went and called on kids that were visitors to our youth group and wanted to invite them to come back to the youth group. And we tried to keep it a little more low-key. We'd knock on the door, hey, and a bunch of high school boys, 2 or 3 of them together, would stand at the door and say, hey, is Josh home? And Josh would come to the door. I mean, how weird does that seem? And we didn't wear suits and ties or anything. We were jeans and T-shirts and stuff like that because we wanted to get kids interested in the youth group. And, of course, the basic bottom line was to see those kids come and get saved, become born-again Christians, brought into our religion. So, if you believe that one of the religions, if you believe in one of the religions that are mythology, and you promote it, and you promulgate it, you're leading unwitting victims into a sort of a trap. If enough people in one area buy into a mythology in one way or another, their beliefs are going to determine social norms and even laws in that area. We look at that now, and we have problems with, like in Minneapolis here, in Minnesota, huge enclaves of Islamic peoples that have all gathered together, but they create their own voting bloc in those segments. And so people are worried about Sharia law and things like that. And of course, we can't do locally things on a state level or a local level that contradict the Constitution of our country. But there is that conflict that's taking place. And you start to see many nonviolent, in most cases, religious wars brewing, just simmering under the surface. Even from societies that might be completely secular, pockets of society or cities that want to run secularly and need to by our Constitution, when you see a religion try to take a foothold, be it Islamic, be it the religious right in America, these are things that start creating problems because those sects of society, segments of society, start to determine social norms and even laws. Look at marriage, the Marriage Act. Look at abortion. Look at all these kinds of social issues that are problems for people, and you get the idea. So this is a harsh, real-world impact on people who don't believe in that particular brand of mythology. And another danger of spreading mythology is that some people will inevitably latch onto the most violent, oppressive, absurd rules within that belief system and use them to justify hurting other people. We did it benignly in the Baptist church by saying everybody else who doesn't believe in us, in what we believe, is going to hell. And we have to keep that in the forefront of our minds as we go out into the world and convert them. So before you go spreading the good word, it's imperative that you make sure it passes the most rigorous test of truth, not just for your sake, but for all of our sakes. And this is something we have to do. So what you really need to do, folks, is consider the possibility that what you believe inside your religious bubble could just simply be mythology and not real truth at all. We got to go out to break. We'll be back in 2 minutes, and we'll hit this up from a little different angle when we get back. Hang on. Hey folks, we're back. Thanks for hanging on through the break. This is Scotty Roberts. You're watching or listening to the Intrepid radio program. Listening, if you're only listening, you're on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. Or you are coming to view it over in the YouTube channel to see the video. Oh, hold on one second. This is live radio, but I have my wife coming in. 1:30. All right? Okay. And you look absolutely stunning, I might say.
I don't know. It changed because you have 2 for today.
Okay. Sorry, folks. That's a little scintillating live radio. So pardon that little interruption. I was just saying you can come over and see the video. I should have had my wife come over into the video and say hello. But she was coming in and out the door. And so, pardon that little real-life interruption. But if you're watching the video stream, it's over on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. Join the other Intrepids over in the live chat room and join the discussion. Throw in your arguments, throw in your insights, throw in your opinions. Come on over and talk. There's a great family of people over there that join the live chat room every night. Now, those of you in the live chat room, by the way, you might look up at the numbers and say, boy, this is a pretty small show. I'm only seeing about 17 to 30 people on any given night. Those are the people that are in the chat room, folks. That's not the body of listeners. My understanding is we have several thousand people that listen to this show on the radio over on Odyssey Radio, via Odyssey Radio or any of its other networks it's affiliated with, as well as terrestrial stations where this show plays. The YouTube stream has a much smaller audience if you come over and want to watch the video and join the YouTube channel. So come on over. And you're not just a small handful of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 13 people over there listening. There are a lot of people there. And so feel free. You don't have to sit in silence or in anonymity over there if you want to contribute. Or, if you prefer, you can just sit there in anonymity and watch the video if that's what you like to do. So come on over and join us, youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. All right. And that was just kind of a weird way of me saying, I don't want you to think that we've only got 30 people who listen to this show or follow this show. There's a lot more. It's just the chat channel over on YouTube is a much smaller representation of what's going on. So there you go. That matters to me. Maybe it shouldn't. But I want to make sure that you understand that. There, I'm going to move on from that. I've gone from familial interruptions into a live broadcast into talking about my numbers. So let's get out of that. That's how distracted I am. And so I like to think I have a pretty focused mind, but I'm like, it's like the old, and don't anybody get offended, but it's like the old ADHD joke. How many ADD kids does it take to screw in a light bulb? Let's ride bikes. So I tend to get a little distracted. Anyway, we were talking in that first segment about your need to consider the possibility that your religion is mythology. And I want to go to something that is a little more horrific than that. I've got a lot of things up here and a lot of information, a lot of things I've been studying. Some of it is pretty harsh and hard and deep stuff, but how about let's take a look for today at the horrors of the church and its holy Inquisition. I think this is something good for us to understand. Now, I know the literalist Orthodox Roman Catholic Church has its justifications for the Inquisition, and I'm not going to so much hit on those today as give you a little history about some of the things that happened in the Inquisition. And so Pope Innocent III said this. He said, this is the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. He said, anyone who attempts to construe a personal view of God which conflicts with church dogma must be burned without piety. Let me say that again. Anyone who attempts to construe a personal view of God which conflicts with church dogma must be burned without piety. And this came from Pope Innocent III. I mean, what a great name for a pope. What's your pope name going to be? I think I'll call myself Innocent. So Pope Innocent III. And I'm just looking up the dates that he lived, which I didn't have in front of me, just so you get an idea of context and when this was said and when it took place. He was born in 1161, and he died in 1216. And his papacy began in 1198 and ran through 1216. So you're talking about 18 years. He was the Pope, Pope Innocent III. And he's the one who said that. Now, the Inquisition was an ecclesiastical court. It was the process of the Roman Catholic Church set up for the purpose toward the discovery and punishment of heresy, which wielded immense power and brutality in the medieval and the early modern times. So now, at the get-go, just defining what the Inquisition was, it was an ecclesiastical court to deal with people who didn't believe the way you believed. And there was brutality involved in it, and great immense power. And so the Inquisition function was principally assembled to repress all heretics of rights, depriving them of their estate and their assets, which became subject to the ownership of the Catholic treasury. And obviously the Catholic Church had the political power to pull this off. Can a church today take away your assets? No, not at least not in Western culture. And so with each they relentlessly sought to destroy anyone who spoke or even thought differently to the Catholic Church. And this system for close to over 6 centuries became the legal framework throughout most of Europe that orchestrated one of the most confound religious orders in the course of humankind. So this was the beginnings, and it was this religion of love, of holiness, of peace, the teachings of Jesus. Christianity. What does Christianity mean? It means you're a follower of Christ. Is this what Christ promoted? No, but it is what the literalist church promoted. Now, the Inquisition had a procedure. At the root word, Inquisition signifies as little of evil as the primitive inquire, or the adjective inquisitive might mean. Words like persons lose their characters by bad associations. So Inquisition has become infamous and hideous as the name of an executive department of the Roman Catholic Church. To be inquisitive isn't a bad thing. To inquire is just simply to question things. But as I just said, words, like people, lose their characters by bad association. And that's what happened with the Inquisition. All crimes, all vices are contained in this one word, Inquisition. Murder, robbery, arson, outrage, torture, treachery, deceit, hypocrisy, cupidity, holiness. No other word in all languages is so hateful as this one word that owes its abhorrent preeminence to its association with the Roman Church, the literalist church. In The Dark Side of Christian History, Helen Ellerby describes how the same men who had been both prosecutor and judge decided upon the sentence of heresy. Once an inquisitor arrived to a heresy-ridden district, a 40-day period of grace was usually allowed to all who wished to confess by recanting their faiths that were in opposition to the literalist Roman Catholic Church faith, the faith established by the hierarchy. And this period of grace, after it had finished, the inhabitants were then summoned to appear before the inquisitor. Citizens were accused, I wasn't stuttering there, citizens were accused of heresy, would be woken in the dead of night, ordered if not gagged, and then escorted to the holy edifice or the Inquisition prison for closer examination, because they had not refuted or recanted their heretical beliefs. In 1244, the Council of Harbon ordered that in the sentencing of heretics, no husband should be spared because of his wife, nor wife because of her husband, no parent spared from a helpless child. And once in custody, these victims waited before the judge anxiously while he pondered through the document of their accusation. And during the first examination, enough of their property was likewise confiscated to cover the expense of the preliminary investigations. The accused would then be implicated and asked incriminating and luring questions in a dexterous manner of trickery calculated to entangle most people. They were actually set up to confound the accused. Many manuals used and promulgated were by the Grand Inquisitor Bernardus Guidonis, the author of Practica. The author of Practica Inquisit. Okay, I don't speak Latin. Practica Inquisitionis. Practica Okay, let's just go to the English. The practice of Inquisition and the Directum Inquisitorium, the guideline for inquisitors, completed by Nicholas Emmerich. He was the Grand Inquisitor Inquisitor of Aragon. And these were the authoritative textbooks for use of inquisitors until the issue of Torquemada's instruction in 1483, which was enlarged and revised the Dictorium. Now, there's just a little wordy history. Some of it was in Latin, and I was stumbling over that. Forgive that. But a chapter of the manual is headed Of the Torture and contains these small reflections. Now, this is right out of the Dictorium, the Inquisitor's Handbook. It says, quote, "The torture is not an infallible method to obtain the truth. There are some men so pusillanimous that at the first twinge of pain they will confess crimes they never committed. Others there are so valiant and robust that they bear the most cruel torments. Those who have been placed upon the rack suffer it with great courage because their limbs accommodate themselves to it with facility or resist with force. Others, with charms and spells, render themselves insensible and will die before they confess anything." That's right out of the Roman churches, the Orthodox Roman Catholic Church's books and guidelines for inquisitors. The author of this gives further directions. Another quote, "When sentence of torture has been given, and while the executioner is preparing to apply it, the inquisitor and the grave persons who assist him should make fresh attempts to persuade the accused to confess the truth. The executioners and their assistants, while stripping him, should affect uneasiness, haste, sadness, endeavoring thus to instill fear into his mind. And when he's stripped naked, the inquisitor should take him aside, exhorting him to confess. Oh, now that we've stripped you naked and we're about to begin torture, we really implore you to confess that you're a heretic. And they promise him his life upon condition of his doing so, provided that he's not a relapsed, a one dilated a second time, because in such a case they cannot promise him that." So later afterwards, in the 16th century, Cardinal Giovanni Carafa a zealot for the purity of Catholicism, who later became the Pope himself, also held this very stern and gloomy view of moral rectitude for heretics. In 1542, he was appointed by Pope Paul III to administer the Inquisition. The manuscript of Carafas gives us this following rule, or these rules that are drawn up by Carafa himself. Listen to this. Firstly, when the faith is in question, there must be no delay. But at the slightest suspicion, rigorous measures must be resorted to with all speed. Secondly, no consideration is to be shown to any prince or prelate, however high his station. Thirdly, extreme severity is rather to be exercised against those who attempt to shield themselves under the protection of any potentate. And fourthly, no man must lower himself by showing toleration toward heretics of any kind. There is the love of Jesus at work. I say sarcastically. Now, refusing to confess that you're a heretic at the first hearing saw heretics being remanded to prisons for several months. Could you imagine living today in a place where if you did not confess that you were a heretic to what you were told you were supposed to believe, you could be thrown in prison? Just for starters, before the torture even began. Now, the dungeons were situated underground, so that the outcries of the subjects might not reach other parts of the building. And in some of the medieval cells, the inauspicious were bound in stocks or chains. They were unable to move. They were forced to keep standing up or on the ground. And in some cases, there was no light, there was no ventilation, there was no lavatory. Inmates were generally starved. They were kept in solitary confinements in the dark and allowed no contact with the outside world, including that of their own family. And this would go on for weeks and months, only because you didn't believe everything the Roman Catholic Church told you needed to believe. So in 1252, Pope Innocent IV officially authorized the creation of the horrifying Inquisition torture chambers. Torture chambers! The head of the church that is teaching about God and Christ and the love of Christ and the peace, the inner peace of the heart, the salvific nature of the truth of Christ, set up torture chambers. We all know this. We all have a glimmering of this stuff. But they set up these torture chambers for people who did not believe exactly what they said they were supposed to believe, as issued by the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church. It also included a new perpetual imprisonment or death at the stake, without the bishop's consent. Acquittal of the accused was now virtually impossible. Thus, with a license granted by the Pope himself, inquisitors were free to explore the depths of horror and cruelty. Dressed as black-robed fiends with black cowls over their heads, inquisitors would extract confessions from just about anyone. You, if you did not believe what the church said, could be hauled into this. The Inquisition invented every conceivable device to inflict pain by slowly dismembering and dislocating the body. Many of the devices were inscribed with this motto, "Glory be only to God." Could you imagine a device used to tear your tongue out of your throat, or pull your fingernails and toenails out, or to burn your feet, or to stretch your body out on the rack to break every bone in your body? Could you imagine those devices all being inscribed, "Glory be only to God"? Where was Jesus, the teachings of Jesus in the midst of all of this? Bernardus Guidanus, the Inquisitor in Toulouse, instructed the laymen as to never argue with the unbeliever, but as to thus thrust his sword into the man's belly as far as it will go. Don't argue with unbelievers. Kill them. George Riley Scott describes how the inquisitors, gorged with their inhumanity, and developed a degree of callousness rarely rivaled in the annals of civilization, with the ecclesiastical authorities condemning every faith outside of Christianity as demonic. Even the very fact of, we see some of this in radical Islam, even yet today. I'm talking radical Islam. Even the very fact of having a charge brought against you and of being summoned to the Inquisition was a sufficient to strike abject terror into the bravest men or women, common folk, living under the church. For very few who entered the doors of those halls of torment emerged whole ever again in either mind or body. If they escaped with their life, they were, with rare exceptions, maimed, physically or mentally, forever. Imagine the fallout of being tortured for whatever reason, and you enter back into society. And in these cases, still entered back into society under the same church and laws and authorities that maimed you in the first place. Those who did happen to endure the dungeons generally went mad in captivity. They screamed out in despair to escape their purgatories. Others willingly committed suicide during their confinements. And the defendants were known to incriminate themselves at any chance they had to escape the horrors of the Inquisition. As Henry Charles Lee described, one of the conditions of escaping the penalties was that they stated all they knew of other heretics and apostates that lived around them, under the general terror, and there was little hesitation to denounce not only friends and acquaintances, but the nearest and dearest kindred, parents, children, brothers, and sisters. These are all on record. This ultimately and indefinitely prolonged the Inquisitions through their associates. And so in the Age of Faith, when the priest was little less than a god himself, a curse from his lips was often more feared than physical torment. And you can imagine how this system was abused, above and beyond just the abuse itself. And to even establish an accusation against a bishop itself required 72 witnesses. If you said, this guy who accused me of heresy, he's corrupt, you needed to have 72 witnesses stand behind you. And against a deacon was 27 witnesses. Against an inferior dignitary was 7 witnesses. And for non-members of the clergy, 2 was sufficient to convict them. So you could have 2 people go, yeah, I saw him, he's heretic, he's blasphemer. And so the whole communities went mad with grief and fear of the thought toward being denounced to the Inquisition. And it spread all over Europe. Men, women, children, all legally murdered in heinous ways on evidence by a church, which today would only be accepted unless the court and jury specifically composed of the inmates of a lunatic's asylum. And during the course, defendants had no rights to counsel, no rights to outside advice. They were even denied the right to know the names of their accusers. There was no favorable evidence or character witnesses that were permitted. You could have no one assist you, aid you, represent you, or stand with you. And in any case, one who even spoke for an accused heretic could be arrested as an accomplice. And many times that was the result of standing up for, let's say it was your wife or your husband. And you say, they are not heretics. This is a false accusation. You too would be brought in under the Inquisition and punished. Never would a prisoner of the Inquisition have seen the accusation against himself or any other. All efforts relating to time, place, and person were absolutely and carefully concealed by the inquisitors. Now, Henry Charles Lee again described, however, that evidence was accepted from witnesses who could not legally testify in any other kind of trial, such as condemned criminals, other heretics, or children, even as young as the age of 2, could confess against you. Could you imagine your 2-year-old condemning you to death? Anyone to death? The Inquisitor Jean Bodin, from 1529 to 96, he was author of the Demonomanie des Sorcerers, or the Demomania of Witches. Demonomania of Witches. He especially valued child witnesses for extracting confessions, as they were easily persuaded to confess. Could you imagine children being persuaded to confess? Children, though, were no exception for being prosecuted and tortured themselves. The treatment of witches' children was particularly brutal. Imagine any institution that claimed to be of spiritual guidance and representing God would treat children brutally. So suspicion alone of witchcraft would warrant torture. Once a girl was 9.5 and a boy was 10.5, and they were both liable to inquiry. Younger children below this age were still nevertheless tortured to elicit testimonies that could be used against their own parents. A famous French magistrate was known to have regretted his leniency when, instead of having young children accused of witchcraft burned, he only sentenced them to be flogged while they watched their parents burning at the stake. Now, folks, I'm out of time. I hate to say that because we're right in the thick of this. We're going to pick this up tomorrow where we left off. We want to talk a little bit more about the Inquisition, the history of the Inquisition. I want to look at the Roman Catholic Church's justification for Inquisition. This is dark, heavy stuff, but it's history we need to understand as we look at the literalist Orthodox Church, which is, you have to ask yourself the question. Now, these aren't practiced today, the way I'm giving this history, but this is the same church. And so you have to ask yourself, no matter what religion you belong to, like we started in the first segment, do you believe in something that's false? I got to leave you on that happy note right now. Thanks for coming. 23-hour break. We'll be back tomorrow. Sit tight.